Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 34th episode of A QISSAA with Ishika, quintessential and inspiring stories of South Asian artists, funded by the California Arts Council Individual Artist Fellow Grant. My name is Ishika Muchal, and I am coming to you from the unceded ancestral lands of the Gabrielino Tongva people, also known as Los Angeles, California. I am so beyond thrilled to welcome my guest today, music director, composer, and arranger, Sheela Ramesh. She was recently named a Woman to Watch on Broadway by the Broadway Women's Fund. Her professional highlights are numerous, including Broadway shows like Six, Almost Famous, Once Upon a One More Time, Merrily We Roll Along, and Hell's Kitchen. Her off-Broadway credits include the Lincoln Center Theater, New York Theater Workshop, the York, and Theater Row, and regional theaters like Berkeley Rep and A.C.T. She also has TV credits like NBC's Annie Live, and her work has been seen in concert at the Carnegie Hall, King's Theater, and Town Hall. She is an artist ambassador for the New York Civil Liberties Union and a teaching artist with Lincoln Center and an associate at Liz Caplan Vocal Studio. Sheela received undergraduate and graduate degrees in music at Carnegie Mellon University and the Royal College of Music. She also holds degrees in psychology and cognitive science from Carnegie Mellon and the University College London, as well as her JD from Yale Law School. I mean, she can literally do it all. Sheela has spent her non-musical professional life working to ensure that all youth have opportunities to thrive. She is a member of Maestra and Musicians United for Social Equity. I am so beyond thrilled to welcome Sheela Ramesh. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
My God, I feel like just fangirling, just reading your bio. I mean, you've done so much.
Thank you. It's been a surprising journey so far. We'll see what comes next.
Sure. Well, this will come next. This episode of the podcast will be the next part. So take us back. What was your first introduction to the arts, and what made you know that you wanted to do this as a career?
That's such a good question. I don't remember a time before I wanted to be a musician. I started playing the piano when I was about 2 years old, and one of my earliest memories is of myself with my little toy piano kind of plunking out Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and London Bridge is Falling Down. I know that my mom, she's a real lover of music, Carnatic music, classical, Western music, old golden age musical theater. And so that was always playing in the house. And I really don't know where I came up with the idea as a little pipsqueak 2-year-old, but I got it into my head that I was going to play the piano and I was going to be a musician. If you'd asked me what I was going to be when I grew up, I would have said, I'm going to be Mozart. And
as you should.
Sure. And I was kind of dead set on it. And I went through my childhood, high school, as a classical musician. I also started singing at some point in there. I sang Carnatic music and Western classical music. Ended up going to college for music in a conservatory program, although I also simultaneously did the cognitive psychology degree that you mentioned. And went to grad school for music. And it was only while there that I, for the first time in my life, started kind of questioning whether this was actually the most useful thing I could do with my time on this earth for the people on this earth. While I was in London in grad school, and it was, I don't know, I guess I was in my early 20s and finally developing a social conscience or something. And starting to wonder whether classical music, and specifically opera, that's the world I was in, had anything really important to say to the social issues of our time. And I decided that I thought that it didn't. I disagree with that assessment now, but at the time I thought that actually I needed to do something more immediately impactful to the greatest social justice needs. And I quit music, moved back to America, went to Yale Law School, became a lawyer for sex trafficked teens, didn't play or sing a note for years. And then as an adult, as a like fully grown person, I started to actually really crave music again in a totally new way. I had these clients, my clients were all kids, teenagers who were so artistic and creative, even though they were going through like the worst things ever. And they really inspired me to kind of dip my toe back in and reimagine the arts as something that actually do speak to the most fundamental and important human needs. And that's really more immediately how I ended up back here.
Yeah, the crisis you're describing, I feel like it's just every artist in their 20s, or at least I can speak for myself, I'm going through the exact same thing of like, it feels like there's so much work that could be done directly, like hands-on impact, but then like you're saying, there's also so much value and so much joy and like, I guess, reflection that we can bring through art and culture and like shaping society in that way. So it's an interesting question of how do you hold both in equal significance?
Yeah, and there's space and a need for all of those things.
Definitely. Yeah. But I love that journey, and I'm so glad it brought you back into the arts because you've done so many amazing things in your career with
Thank
that.
you. I'm glad to.
Yeah. So you were talking about how you started with like Carnatic music as well. So do you still blend both Indian and Western and like other styles within your compositions now?
You know, it's interesting. When I was growing up, those worlds were very bifurcated for me. I did Bharatanatyam for most of my life, or most of my young life,
Yeah.
and also sang Carnatic music. And I had that world, but then I also had my Western musical world, and there was no overlap between the two. I mean, I even felt like I had two different voices in my body, which is ludicrous. That my Carnatic singing voice, which is not connected to my classical singing voice, my Western classical singing voice. And I kind of kept them bifurcated for the longest time. It didn't even occur to me that there was any room for them to interact with each other until much, much later. After I'd left music, come back, all of that. And I, here in the past few years in New York, have started working on some shows and concerts and things like that with other South Asian American artists who have had much more robust, or at least seemingly less bifurcated experiences with their South Asian musical backgrounds. And it's kind of been really eye-opening for me to like learn how to see myself as the sum of those things and not like between them or something. And as a result, getting to work on other people's really cool music that like lives in the and not the or. It's inspired some of my more recent music to be a little bit more all of me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because it's like, I think as people with hyphenated identities, like Indian American or just like whatever that identity may be, we always feel like we're living in two different worlds that we're not enough of for either sometimes. And that kind of makes you want to like separate different parts of yourself, but it's like how? Because they're both part of you.
Yeah.
But it takes, I think, some time, or at least it did for me, to like own that. Because I did the same thing. I grew up doing Bharatanatyam and learning Hindustani classical, but also like Western and musical theater. And then you go into like a musical theater class and you sing like a scale, and they're like, that note doesn't exist. And I'm like, no, it does.
You're like, no, it is. It's just in between the black and the white key. It's there.
Right. I'm like, there's so many different types of music outside of like the standard, the Western thing. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but
no, I know I'm not the only one, but I'm always shocked when I realize that I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
And then seeing that there are people who actually had different experiences of it. Very heartening. Like where I grew up, when I grew up, it was extremely white
Mhm.
town suburb, there really was, it was just like the most white bread place. There was no room for the idea of a
Sure.
hyphenated identity
Right.
there. And like I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. It was a time when, at least in my environment, it didn't feel like that white world valued
Mhm.
the other parts of me. And so I
Right.
just kept them separate with my Indian people,
Mhm.
as though they had nothing to say to this other life. But then the other
Right.
life, over time living in America, and I've only ever, I've grown up here. That's like, well, that's
Mhm.
the real world. That's my real life. So this
Yeah.
other like Indian thing, that's my hereditary
Your
life. May
personal
not
and culture.
really
Yeah,
be
yeah.
with me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so hard to navigate, and then you also tread the lines of, like, do I have to represent everyone
Mhm.
with when I choose to do something Indian,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
Especially
Which is
being, like,
impossible. There's 1.34 whatever billion
so many.
of
There's
us,
so
and I
many.
just have my one little singular experience, which isn't
Right.
even like, I didn't even grow up in India, so it's all filtered through
Exactly.
my indirect
Yeah.
contact.
Mhm. But it's beautiful of, like, what you're saying now that you're able to see how, like, other people have kind of lived in that intersection, and do you feel like now your identity is more impacting your art and vice versa?
Uh, it's going in that direction more. I
Mhm.
don't have the same sort of split myself in 2 pieces
Sure.
feeling, or this feeling like I need to prove myself as, like, legitimately
Mm.
Western in order
Sure.
to,
Yeah.
command respect or
Mm.
something. I mean, it's so muddled when I think of it, but that was part of it,
Yeah.
and now I feel like I feel comfortable owning that I am Indian American
Mm.
in both spaces, in
Right.
whatever the in-betweens are, and, I'm getting more and more able to actually marry the 2 in,
Sure.
like, musical spaces.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, we really dug into, like, the heavy hitting questions first unintentionally. Um, Going back, like, can you talk a little bit about what your musical educational journey was like?
Sure. So the first musical thing that I ever did formally was Bharatanatyam. So,
Mhm.
I'd been fooling around on a toy piano and
Right.
playing songs, but the first like class in anything I ever took was Bharatanatyam.
Mhm.
And I do mean that musically. I mean, it's dance, but
Mhm.
it's so intrinsically a
Very much
musical
so.
dance form.
Yeah.
At least the way that I learned it, it was much more musical than I even considered it like athletic or anything. It was
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
um, and then, and of course, I was taking piano lessons
Mm.
as well. So I already kind of had the 2 different musical worlds going, with my strict Russian classical piano teacher and my strict
Yeah.
Bharatanatyam teacher. And then, I guess when I was like, I want to say 8-ish, 9-ish, I started
Mhm,
singing Carnatic music as well, and, I mean, I just kept adding. I'm such a, like, musically voracious kid.
mhm.
So piano, and then I added Bharatanatyam when I was, like, 4, and then I added Carnatic
Right.
whenever 8-ish, and then I added, uh, singing, like, classical Western music,
Mhm.
around middle school or early high school, um, and, I was, like, doing all the plays, all the shows, all the
Right.
whatevers, and then when I went to college, I knew that I wanted to go for music,
Mhm,
and uh I was kind of 2 minds about whether that I wanted that to be as a singer or as a pianist or maybe both,
mhm.
something. My parents also really wanted me to do something else with a college degree. And I don't think triple majoring is usually a thing.
That's a lot. That's a
A lot.
lot.
So I auditioned on both. I was accepted
Mhm.
on both, but ultimately I chose to go to Carnegie Mellon University as a singer in their conservatory, and then also did a degree at the same time, a Bachelor of Science in Cognitive Psychology, which wasn't, I think, exactly what my parents had in mind when they wanted me to do something more practical at the same time, but that's what I did.
Yeah.
And then after college, I won something called the Marshall Scholarship, which allows you to study in the UK for free for a couple of years. And I moved to London and studied opera at the Royal College of Music in London. And then after that, kind of on my way back to America to go to law school to try to have this whole other life, I used the end of my Marshall Scholarship to go to University College London and do a master's in cognitive and decision sciences. Not because I thought that I was going to do that with my career, but in part because I felt like I needed something, like I needed like some more academic mooring before coming to law school.
Yeah.
And I was interested in it, and it was what my previous other academic life had been. So then law school, then life.
Yeah. Can I ask what or why cognitive science psychology?
That's a good question. In that I probably never had a really articulable answer other than that outside of music, trying to understand how our minds work and how we make decisions, or which things are decisions, or do we just think they're decisions but are kind of determined. That has always been just interesting to me. And I took a psychology class in high school, and I was not like generally very intellectually stimulated by most of high school, but I was really into this class. So that kind of motivated some of it in college. And I worked in a few different labs in college that were doing really cool work, understanding how children learn different kinds of things, how people learn different languages, like what is just going on in there. And I maintained that interest in and both like how individuals make decisions and how groups come to believe things and make decisions. I found that and continue to find that really fascinating. Also horrifying, and whenever you like read anything in the news, but fascinating.
For sure. Yeah, I think there's so much overlap between like psychology and the arts because like, art is a reflection of the human condition in one way or another. So that makes a lot of sense that you would find that overlap and kind of explore that. Yeah. So you primarily work with the piano and voice, is that correct?
That's right.
Cool. So
I think I'm going to learn the accordion. I feel like I should learn the accordion, but I have not yet learned the accordion.
That's so cool. Well, we'll have to do another episode once you.
Yes, I'm going to give you a demo of my burgeoning accordion skills.
Amazing. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit like about your work? Because I know you do composing, arranging, and directing. So what does each of that entail?
Sure. So mostly, I would say the majority of my work, at least in recent years, has been in music directing and related things in like musical theater settings. Music directing usually involves kind of being the person that leads the process of taking the music that the composer has written, whatever's on the page, and turning it into the music that you're going to see on stage. A lot of that is working closely with the cast to teach and coach and just shape the music, and of course conduct it. Working with the band or the orchestra to, actually their side of the exact same thing. And then ultimately, if you're conducting in performance setting, you start the clock and you are the thing that keeps the musical aspect of the show moving along and sounding however it's going to sound. And usually I play and conduct, which is typical for musical theater nowadays. So playing the piano while conducting.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Sometimes I am in a position where I am not the music director and I'm just playing. And that is a delight. It's really nice to not be in charge some of the time.
Sure.
And get to watch somebody else make the hard decisions. Composing, I love. It's something that I've been doing on and off since I was a small kid. And it's something that, like most writers who write anything, I have to be dragged kicking and screaming into actually sitting down and doing it a lot of the time, with a deadline or some shame or something.
Oh my God. Yeah. That does work. It does work.
It's effective.
Yeah.
And I love composing because it's like the most pure form of artistic expression.
Right.
Or for me, it feels like that because it's not, there's no balancing of anybody else's priorities. It's not, well, we have 2 hours of rehearsal and this is what we're going to hit. And this is what the director wants. And this is what the singer can do. And this is what it's just like your own vision.
Right.
And then it becomes tomorrow's problem, how it's going to be executed.
Sure.
But it's also very solitary and requires a lot of intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
Hence my need for public shaming to get it done.
Whatever works.
Yeah.
Whatever works. Artists, we are interesting people.
Yeah. We love it. And yet we need to be forced to actually do it some of the time.
Yeah. I mean, creative block and art burnout is so real.
It's so real.
Yeah. Whatever works to get around that.
Yeah.
So other than creative block, can you talk about some of the, I guess, early struggles or lessons that you might have learned in the beginning part of your journey?
Yeah. So, this actually relates conceptually to something we were talking about earlier, but, I used to think that in order to be sort of a serious artist, musician, or anything else, that you needed to be sort of single-mindedly pursuing that, and that to have any other skills, experiences, interests somehow lessened. It somehow made you less of a real serious artist. And I sort of even in high school, I didn't want people to think of me as sort of smart or academic. I just wanted to be seen as creative and artistic. And probably that was related to some hangups about fitting into a model minority trope too. But it was there. And then I think it made me really want to no, don't focus on this stuff. Who cares about that? I don't care about that. Only this, only music. And then that was reinforced in the conservatory setting of college, of course, because in that setting, all of the serious professor, coaches, whatever, I felt like they encouraged exactly that if I was in the voice program, but many people knew that I had played piano and had played to a high level, and a voice teacher would hear something and be like, well, why don't you, what are you doing this? How can you do this if you're doing that? Kind of
right, stay in your lane.
Hear about my other degree that I was trying to secretly pursue on the side. And they basically, the insinuation was that if you're doing all that, you must not be serious about this, because someone really serious about this does not just eat, breathes, and sleeps this. And I think that's so damaging, but it really is what I internalized, that to care about anything else makes you less of an artist. And it has taken me many, many years to get to the other side of that view, because I think it actually makes for very shallow artists, in addition to happy people who are not actually fulfilling most of what they have to offer the world and themselves.
Sure.
But again, there's so many cool ways that you can chart your own path. But if you believe that the only legitimate way is to go exactly down the center of the prototypical thing, I need to sing Carmen at the Met, otherwise I'm not a real opera singer, Yeah, so that was a struggle. It probably contributed to why, when I decided that I wanted to do something else, why I felt like the only way to do it was to fully leave music and do something completely different, because it didn't even occur to me that there was a way to veer even slightly sideways of my
Right.
operatic whatever path, that would actually meet any of my other interests.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think so many of those, like, other interests inform your artistic practice.
Totally, and, like,
Yeah.
many of the best artists, or people that I think are the most interesting artists,
Mhm.
have so much else going on that
Right.
they interweave with, and that informs their artistry, and their
Yeah.
artistry informs the other stuff, and it's actually just one big life that you're living, and not
Yeah.
all of these, like, piecemeal things.
Right, because it's like, if you're not aware of, like, other things, or if you're not passionate about other things, like, what stories are you gonna
"Oh, what are
tell?
you even doing? What are you even
What are
talking
you
about?"
talking about? Yeah. Yeah, God, yeah. I literally I know we talked about this, but I'm literally going through the same crisis right now of, like,
Mhm.
"Ugh, if I do grad school and, like, change it, does that mean I have to, like, give up acting?"
Turns
You
out,
know?
no, you can be
But
a
there's
whole person.
right, right. And there's so much in between, and I think just, like, thinking in a binary in that way is kind of like what the institutions that you went to kind of raised you in, and but that there's so much beyond that, like,
So
weird
much.
construct. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ugh.
like most artists that you ever talk to who you admire, you find, and I'm sure you have found a million versions of this with all of your other interviews on this
Uh-huh.
series, that like very few people actually have a straight and narrow journey
Mhm.
at
Yeah.
all after all that.
Right, right. No, it's important, I think, just for me to hear that and for everyone else to listen to that, like, being an artist does not mean that you can't do anything else, and doing other things cannot mean that you can't be an artist.
Yep, it doesn't make you less of one. In fact,
Mhm.
it might make you more of one.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, what does a day in the life look like for you? If there is such a thing, because I know that's very hard,
Sure.
but
I mean, I feel like there's like when I'm on a show that's like in rehearsal or performing
sure.
version of day in the life, and then there's all the other days in the life,
Right,
'cause
right.
they're completely
Completely different.
different. Um, when I'm, let's say I'm like in rehearsal for
Mhm.
something, which means I have to show up and be there all day.
Right.
Uh, well, I guess the beginning is the same for everything. I have a 4-year-old, so a day in the life starts with like getting up, getting her dressed, getting me dressed, and like
Mhm.
getting her ready for preschool, and like
Sure.
taking her to preschool. It's like the best part of the day. And then if I have like a rehearsal day, if there's any time at all before I have to leave, I might like look at some music, look
Mhm.
at it, what's on the schedule for the day. If not, hopefully I looked at it the night before, because then I'm right and on my way into Manhattan. I live in Queens, so I'll come
Okay.
into Manhattan for most things that I work on.
Mhm.
And then rehearsals are typically 10 to 6. It's like typical. And then I will rush back home and pick up my kid, or maybe my husband has picked her up, and we'll hang out
Mhm.
together and make dinner and put her to bed. And then I'll hang out with my husband for a bit. And then, like if I'm in rehearsal for something, there's probably some work that I should do before the next day. So I
Sure.
will look at that.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like the closest I ever get in artistic life to the 9 to 5
Mhm.
world is like when I'm in rehearsal for
Yeah.
something. But then when I'm actually performing, then the daytimes vary much more, because there might be like an understudy rehearsal or a matinee, but
Right.
there also might be nothing, in which
Right,
case,
right.
I get to hang out with my husband more. I probably look at other projects that I have to just do work for other
Mhm.
things coming down the pike, maybe some arranging, maybe some composing, maybe
Mhm.
just like practicing, because that also just needs to happen.
Yeah.
Um, and then go to the theater for a show. I
Mhm.
tend to get places very early so that I can have some time to like
Yeah.
warm up, get myself in the zone, like literally
Sure.
warm up the chops.
Yeah.
Probably
In
there's
case
like,
the subway isn't going, or, gotta
I feel like the MTA hates me, so I give myself a nice big cushion,
Right, right.
like get out of Queens mode, get into
Sure.
show mode. And then, and I like almost superstitiously, I warm up, like I play some scales and warm up before I play any show, even if I'm doing it 8 times a week. I just always do that. And then I'll play the show, and then there's like a huge adrenaline rush, and then I will leave the theater, and it'll all start to dissipate because you know how it is. You like do the big thing. It's like and then I'm like probably not gonna go out and party and whatever. I'm probably gonna like go straight home and try to watch a show with my husband before we go to bed, and probably I'm gonna like eat second dinner and at midnight, and so then the adrenaline like drips away on the long local subway ride home when the E turns over, and then start again the next day.
That midnight snack is such a vital part of every artist's journey, I think.
Yep.
Because
when I was younger, when I was young and single, I routinely would just like make dinner at 2 a.m. I'm very much a night owl by nature. And nothing tastes as good as food that you've made fresh from scratch in the middle of the night.
Oh, absolutely.
And I still have like a bit of that. So that midnight snack when I come home is like, it can be elaborate.
You're so much better than me. Mine is just like cereal.
Oh, mine could be like lasagna. It could be like anything.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm gonna have to take some notes from you then.
It's not, my neighbors probably hate it, but
hey, if you invite your neighbors over, they won't hate it. But that does sound like a very, very much like a day in the life of an artist. It's so like unpredictable, but it's so nice when you have that like kind of structure to operate within, and then you still have that like freedom within that structure.
Totally. And then if I'm not actually in rehearsals or a show, like at this moment, I'm not. And then the days could be anything. Like it could be that I have a bunch of meetings or calls or whatever, or that I'm writing, or that I'm actually going to like go see stuff.
Right. Yeah. Or you're doing a podcast with a
I'm doing a podcast with you.
Yeah. So our next question would be, when you choose projects, what do you look for in the projects that you want to work on? And like, how do you find your collaborators?
I have sort of, I have a metric for jobs. When somebody is like actually offering me something or saying what I like to be considered for something. And it is that there's like 3 or 4 factors. 1, obviously, is always money. 2, I know I wish it weren't, but it's in the picture. 2 is the sort of like actual how artistically drawn am I to the actual material of it? Like, is this music that I really just like, I love and want to play as much as I can, or a story that I'm totally compelled by and want to put out into the world, or the actual artistic part. So money, arts. Then the third is like kind of the resume value, or the like stepping stone value. Like what does this do for my career? And then the fourth is are the people involved people I'm just gonna have a great time with. So like it's just gonna be fun to do it. And I've learned that it's never good if it's just one of those 4 factors. Obviously, if it's 0, you don't do it. If it's just one of those 4 factors, it's not actually. It's usually not a good experience. If it is 2 of those factors, hit or miss. If it's 3, it's going to be great. If it's 4, it's never been 4, so I don't know. But
it's so interesting for me to hear this from you, because like one of maybe my 3rd or 4th episode on this show ever was with Beza Dabu, and he said a very similar metric. His had 3. It was like a triangle of people, pay, and play. So very similar to what you're saying. And it's hard to find those projects that are like 3 or 4.
Yeah, I've never done 4. I have had 3, and those have been fantastic. And 2 can really kind of go either way.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like money and artists. I mean, I was just thinking about this the other day, and it's like, what if we lived in a world again of just patronage like they had in the
Well, they
ancient
just took
times?
that one right off the table. It'd be
Yeah.
great.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
I mean, we'd
Yeah.
be beholden to our benefactors, but at least
True.
we wouldn't have to worry about slogging for every single one of the
Yeah.
potential projects.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there is value in having, like, your own agency and getting to decide what you want to do rather than being attached to being the propaganda item for those people that are paying you.
I guess if you really like what they're propagandizing, maybe it's
Sure.
fine.
Sure. Um, do you feel like you've ever had a pressure to, like, completely erase or change your Indian identity to fit in the Western world? I know, and especially since the field that you started off with, like, opera is a very, like, canonically Eurocentric
Mhm.
area.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
definitely I felt that in
Mhm.
the in my time in the opera world. I'm sure that things have changed some amount in the
Mhm.
more than a decade since
Mhm.
I have kinda left that.
Mhm.
So I don't, like, malign it, but I very much felt that, and, uh, yeah, I remember being at the Royal College of Music in London and doing some performance of something where, they costumed us, and I don't remember if it was even, like, an opera or, like, opera scenes or something.
Mhm.
Anyway, they did the wigs, they did the costumes, they did the corsets,
Right.
they did the makeup, but the makeup lady obviously did not have any makeup that
Mm.
remotely suit my skin tone,
Sure.
and, she made me feel like that was, like, my fault for being
Mm.
weird and, like, the wrong color and, like, "Oh gosh, nobody told me I was gonna have to make up someone who looked like you," and
Ouch, oh my god.
yeah, and, it's already can be a really surreal thing singing,
Right.
like, 18th century, very European music in a very white space,
Right.
wigged in, like, the most powdered blonde little ringlets,
Yeah.
pale pink corseted satin whatever gown,
Right.
ruffles, and, like, I already felt like
Like,
just
this isn't the space for
like,
you.
what
Yeah.
like, do I look like a weird cartoon to be, like, from the back, sorta, white blonde and,
Right.
like, we've all seen Amadeus, you know the look, and
Mhm.
then from the front, I still have my face,
Right.
and, like, it felt so much like, "Wow, I'm just trying to shove myself into this space that was not
Mm.
created for me, and has no interest in reshaping itself to, like, fit people like me into it, and I
Right.
look stupid, and maybe that means that I sound stupid and don't belong."
Mhm.
I very much felt that pressure. Uh, it probably also contributed to how easy it felt for me to just say goodbye to all of it when I
Mm.
did.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think opera specifically is such, like, a tricky field because it really caters to, like, the old white guard in how it holds up material written predominantly by white composers and artists. And I used to work at the LA Opera. That's why I feel
Ah,
like I have an insight
mhm,
into it. And e even, like, the shows that do feature, like, storylines of people of color are written by white people and with a very, like, colonial white savior lens. Um, yeah, so I'm sorry you went through that experience of just,
well,
like, feeling like there is no place for you.
yeah, it's funny because like, it was before I really fully had my own kind of, like, racial consciousness.
Mhm, mhm.
Like, I don't know, I was too old to have not yet, but, like, I you just accept these things at face value.
Right, yeah.
Like, in college, someone very important in the music department had one day like pulled me aside and apropos of nothing and had said, I never want you to feel lesser because of your ethnicity. And you know, in opera, because the beauty of you is that you can play anything. You can be Italian, you can be Lebanese, you can be blah, blah, blah. And I mean, he was like 80 years old. Like he meant nothing but actually like positive things from it.
Right.
But like in the year of our Lord 2025, we can all hear that and have different feelings.
Yeah. That's like kind of when you go to like Sephora and the makeup lady who's like helping you find a shade is like, don't worry, it's not, your skin isn't like that dark. And I was like, what does that mean?
You're like, I didn't say it was.
I'm like, it's not a bad thing.
I wasn't even thinking about that. Now, yeah.
Like, you're just making me feel weird. Yeah. Anyway, that was like a super tangent.
Oh, I've been at that Sephora counter.
Yeah. It's hard.
I've tried to find many a time, because I used to be an opera singer, pantyhose that were the same skin color as me.
Yeah.
It's barely possible in 2025, and it was not possible in 2010.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, you go to whatever store and it's like they have 3 shades and none of them really
not even close.
No.
Yep.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, this is something that like I've never talked about on the podcast before, so I'm really glad that like you're bringing this up about just like physically how hard it is to fit in those spaces that don't make room for you.
Yeah. They like weren't made for us. And I do think, maybe this is overly sunny of me, but I do think that in the last 5 to 10 years, and especially like in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a bit more interest and movement in trying to change that.
Sure.
Both because I think there's like a critical mass of artists who come from non-white, whatever, stereotypical backgrounds, who are loud and proud and like willing to advocate for everybody. And because I think that like the social consciousness of America has taken little baby steps towards a recognition that there are multiple races that exist in this space.
Right. 2 steps forward, 1 step
back.
Baby
step. I don't want to overstate it. So
for sure. I want to ask, like, what prompted your specific work in like your law era, I guess, of your life, and how do you find yourself using art as a vessel for social change?
So I went into the like anti-child trafficking work in part as sort of the nexus of a few things that I was working on in law school. While I was in law school, I worked on like a few different like student clinics and summer projects and internships and stuff like that. One where I helped a refugee in Jordan. She was a Kuwaiti refugee who'd been the victim of all sorts of torture and political persecution and like sexual trauma, bad stuff. Helping her to get refugee status and get resettled in a safe country. And also was working with a clinic where we represented kids who were, we all know what CPS is. There's different names in different states, like Child Protective Services. So kids who are in that system on, which is the system in which, like, if things go all the way straight to hell, you end up with like parental rights being terminated and you're in foster care or being adopted. So kids who are in like abuse and neglect proceedings in that system. And I worked on another like ongoing clinic helping domestic violence victims get restraining orders against their abusers. And then much of my like summer legal work was with or for kids who were being marginalized or abused in one of a variety of ways. And I felt that I really wanted to work at the intersection of harms affecting women, young women, and kids. And I had come to learn about the actual existence of human trafficking in America and sex trafficking, and fun tidbits like in America, the average age, or at least as of some years ago when I was starting this work, the average age that a kid would be recruited into the sex trafficking world was 13, after which their life expectancy was 7 years, which is like horrifying. It's like
Oh
so
my God, yeah.
shocking to the system as like an American. And I felt like I had left an artistic, privileged ivory tower world to go do something for the people who needed something the most. And what could be most than that?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
nothing morally complicated about it in my mind. You know, in law school and being a lawyer, there are many morally complex things that you can take on that you can think are like important public needs, but are also, they have an ick factor or something. And like helping kids who are trafficked, like it's so easy.
It's very
Morally, the work is hard, but that part of it like couldn't have been easier. And so yeah, that was what motivated me to start doing that. And I also like have always been drawn to understanding how kids develop, and like this is actually the thing that like you were asking me about, what interested me about cognitive science and psychology, and I had really focused kind of unintentionally on like child psychological development. And so I think part of that little thing was tapped into when I decided that I wanted to work with kids. I will say that like having kids as clients has its like own complications, but I found it incredibly meaningful and rewarding, and like worthwhile as the reason to give up art to go like be of service.
Right. Yeah. Well, I just want to like say thank you for all the work that you did. I mean, it's really, really important, meaningful work. So thank you for like dedicating
saying that.
to that. Yeah. And I feel like now you said you kind of work at like the intersection of like arts and activism, or in that sphere. And do you have any like visions of what you think should be changing in the industry, in the field of art, that you would like to see happen?
Sure. And I will say I aspire to work at the intersection, but the reality is never as easy.
I mean, we met.
I do like, I mean, some of what I hope to see over years and generations is I think are going to be better artistically too, which is sort of the point of it. I think one, I would love to see more variation. I mean, we can call it diversity, but it doesn't have to be whatever anyone's image of diversity is. In like literally who's writing the material that gets what kind of a stage, and what stories are being told, like what stories and whose stories. And two, who is making that, who's like executing it, right? On stage actors, pits, orchestras, off stage creative teams, crews, stage management, designers, etc. And then third, who gets to see and hear it, and is like invited to be moved by it, or be made curious by it, or be drawn in and made familiar to stories and sounds and people that are like them, or that like really are not like them, because that is actually how we grow as humans. We have to see things that we connect to, but we can also be stretched to connect to things that we didn't realize there's something like in our, universal humanity. And I think there are many kinds of variation that are valuable. And of course, like racial, ethnic, gender diversity and variation are top of mind for me and for many people. But I would also be really curious to see, and like in some ways even additionally excited to see more like perspective variation and cultural variation and just like speaking in my little theater world, and like what we think gets to be a story that goes on stage in a big theater city. And what accents do we get to hear? What kinds of music get to be considered splashy enough or moving enough or whatever. It's not that I'm bored of the same beautiful kinds of stories and sounds that we've heard for 100 years, but I'm eager for more too.
Yeah. It sounds like basically talking about like gatekeeping, kind of removing that gatekeeping of like what gets to be told, who gets to tell it, and who gets to experience it.
Yeah, and who do we actually think wants to, and who do we think would be bettered by it? Because we're so limited in our assumptions about who wants to go to the theater and see something that changes them, and like who wants to tell a story through a platform like theater. We have all these assumptions, but I think that they're really wrong, and they only represent like a really small slice. And I think that that's true because there are theater cultures and musical cultures in every segment of society and all over the world. And so why we assume that only a very thin slice of America would be interested in participating in our biggest stages here. Why would that be the case?
Yeah. That's really important. Do you have, well, the show is called QISSAA, and QISSAA means episode. So do you have a influential episode or QISSAA from your life that has shaped you as a person or an artist that you would be willing to share?
Yes. I've literally never told anybody this, though.
Oh my God. Okay.
It's quasi mortifying. Okay. So when I was a kid, let's say like middle school, I would like run home from school every day so that I could be home before anybody else in my family was there, so that I could sing with nobody else able to listen, like take myself on a little tape recorder. And it was like the most pure, unvarnished, like artistically fulfilling thing I've ever done in my life. Because there's no stakes, and I just loved to sing. And I was writing songs, and it was like totally unselfconsciously just like making music because I was driven by it. And it was around that time that I had probably psychologically graduated from my toddler days of I'm going to be Mozart when I grow up into my like, no, I really want to make music professionally. And I don't actually have a clue how that happens. And so this is like 2001, probably like early days of the internet as we know it. There's no social media. There's nothing there. I found the website of, I will not name them, a very, very famous singer at that time, like someone that I sort of idolized. And, this was like as paper fan mail was transitioning into like email fan mail. And so I found an email address, and I wrote them an email in which I had no expectation about whether you would even go to them, but whatever. I wrote this email. It was basically like, "Hi, I'm Sheela. I'm 12 years old," whatever it was. And I really, really, really want to do this professionally. I know I have the talent. I know that I work hard. I just actually don't know what the steps are. Can you tell me? And like in retrospect, it's like cute and also like so embarrassing because like I'm like writing to like this celebrity being like, tell me how to like, how do I get an agent?
What do I do? Yeah.
It was like, get me the nitty gritty. And of course, I did not get it. Like, weeks passed, I forgot about it. Nothing came in. And then like months passed and I'm on vacation with my family and I'm like checking my email in like some communal computer that my brother and probably my parents and I were all sharing. And my brother was standing next to me and I check my email and I have a response from this person and I like open it on my Hotmail and it's long. It's like,
oh my God,
multiple very long paragraphs. It was too long to even just like sort of skim read. And my brother is like standing right next to me and I'm too self-conscious to like tell him about this whole like embarrassing thing whereby I emailed somebody. And I was like, don't look at my email. And of course, my older brother, being an older brother, was like, what? I'm not looking. And then he read out loud, or he like quoted out loud the first line of the email. So I was like, he was looking. And I still remember the first line of the email, which was, apologizing for it taking so long and then saying, I'm so behind on my email. It's embarrassing. And then I was like, oh, don't look at it. And so I like skim read the whole thing, which was like very detailed advice. It was so sweet, actually. But I skimmed it really, really, really fast, like in 30 seconds so that I could exit out of my email and shut it. So that, like I wouldn't have to explain anything. And I'll just look at it later.
Right.
Here's the kicker. I've never seen that email again because the next time I went to log in to my email, someone had changed my email password on my Hotmail, which years later I actually found out what that was, but it's a story for another day. And I was never able to get back in and eventually had to admit defeat and just get a new email address. But I've never gotten to actually sink my teeth into this long, detailed advice about how to like get into this biz. And
oh my God.
It like weighed on me for a long time because it was like, I have the keys to the castle and I can't get in to the keys.
Wow. Oh my God. Well, I guess it's like the universe being like, you need to craft your own way.
Yeah, I guess so. And then I like over decades eventually did.
Right. But oh my God. Wait,
that's right. And I was like, literally, I just want this one email back. The universe can take away the whole Hotmail.
Yeah.
This probably has taken away Hotmail by now.
Yeah, I think kind of. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I see it pop up occasionally on people's names, but I'm like,
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It was my first touch of like, oh, I'm going to be able to do this. Oh, no, I'm not.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you ever did your paths ever cross with this person again?
Me and this super famous person? Nope.
No? Yeah. Okay. Damn.
But you know what? I'm still alive. That person is still alive. We'll see.
You know,
Maybe they'll watch your podcast and be like, I used to say I'm so behind on my email. I'm embarrassed. I used to say that to every fan I responded to.
Right. They like go look in their email for 2001, a 12-year-old girl writing. Yep. That'd be amazing. I would feel like this
everything has been worth it, if so.
Yeah, this was the purpose of this podcast. Nothing else for this. Do you have I guess since you asked and you can't really share, but can you share any advice that you would have for aspiring artists that hopefully will not get lost in an email?
Well, I think people should just do it and not be afraid of it's so cliche, but like it doesn't need to be good. You just need to do it, like it's good is for after you've done it 1,000 times, then you can like start worrying about good. But along the way, like you just need to do it and not be afraid that it's not good enough or that you don't belong in whatever that artistic thing is. Like there's room. And also if there isn't, it should change because people have their own unique voices and other people should get to hear them, and like not to self-censor and just do the thing and like bring your whole self to the thing.
Whew, yeah. Isn't that like the biggest enemy of creation is self-censoring?
I know. And I like should take my own advice too. But...
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Do you have, I guess, like any upcoming work that people can see or where we can find your work?
You know, I'm really not as present on like social media and the internet as I should be. I'm sure. Well, I do have a website. Some stuff is there. Feel free to check it out. I'm sure that I'm YouTubeable, but I've never tried. So,
Okay.
But honestly, the best place to come see anything that I do is to come do it and come see me perform in person. I'm very much a live performer. Do I have anything coming up that's exciting? You know, I'll keep you posted on it. I sub at the moment at Hell's Kitchen on Broadway. I play an onstage piano. So if you come to the show when I'm performing, you'll like get to see me floating above the stage with a big piano. I'm currently writing music for a play that I will put more information up on my website so that when it's available, people can check it out.
Awesome.
And who knows? I should be more self-promotional, but those are two things.
No, that's amazing. That's a great start. And your website is?
SheelaRameshMusic.com.
Perfect. Okay. Also, I was on your website to like find out more about you, and I love your opening page of like "I am woman, hear me score."
Oh, thank you.
Obsessed with that. Absolutely obsessed. That's genius. That's
you know what? I'm so proud of myself now. I didn't know anybody would ever look at it, listen to it, whatever.
No, oh my God, I saw that and I was like, this is fire. I'm so excited for our conversation just from this. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again for your time and just like sharing your wisdom and your journey. And it was beautiful. I do hope that you write to that artist again and that somehow.
I think it's harder to find people's email addresses now than it was 20-something years ago.
I'm sure there are ways.
I'll find an agent of an agent of a something.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. And to everyone who tuned in, thank you for watching and stay tuned for an announcement of the next QISSAA. And till then, stay safe, be well.
Bye. Thank you.